Hey, what's up guys? This is Anthony from Anthony's Customs, and for this review we are looking at the SH Figuarts Avengers Age of Ultron Iron Man Mark 45, which is my favorite look for Iron Man from the movies. I was really psyched when I heard about this for the upcoming movie at the time, and then I was even more psyched when I saw that they were making a Figuarts figure of it. So needless to say, I was really happy to get this. Let's take a look at the packaging first, and then we'll get into the figure. For the box, we have our standard Avengers style packaging, so it'll go nicely with the rest of the guys. I will be doing a comparative video once the Thor figure comes out, and then once the Figma Hulk comes out, I'll be comparing all of them against each other. Briefly, probably not too much because they're not really the same things. But anyway, let's take a look at this guy. He stands roughly just about 16 centimeters, and then that makes him about 6¼ inches, which isn't exactly Marvel Legends scale, but it should be close enough for those of you that want to mix and match them on your shelf. You should be able to do that. Let's look at the accessories, and then we will get into the figure. So you can see he has the fist hands that come on him. Then we have two open palm hands, which are around here somewhere. There they are. So we have two open palm hands. Unfortunately, none of the hands have painted repulsors. So that's a big time no-no. That's not good. They should definitely be painted. I don't know how Bandai messed that up, but they did. And they all have the hand guards on there, which is cool. But I'm pretty sure in the movie, the gold part wasn't like that. I don't think it was always there, and it is for these. So the gold part's not that big of a deal. But the hands not having repulsors is a big deal. Even on these hands, no repulsors painted, so that's not cool. And then we do get these hands with the pegs on them, so they don't need to be painted, obviously. But when you attach these accessories, which are the repulsor blasts, they're nicely done. They're nice translucent yellow plastic with the white frosting on there. They don't shoot out of the center of the palm. The way the pegs are angled and the way it's shaped, it shoots out kind of at an angle from the bottom heel of the palm, like over here, rather than the center part. So it looks a little bit weird. It's obviously not, there goes that one, it's obviously not a huge deal, but it is definitely something to consider when you're trying to make a cool pose, and you can see his whole hand off to the side and the repulsor shooting off this way. It looks weird. You can see at this angle especially, the weird angle that they did that. I don't know how they messed that up. They've made like, what, 1 million Iron Man figures by now? I don't know what happened, but they definitely screwed that up. So anyway, we get two of these firing weaponized repulsor blasts. Then we get two of these little ones, which are for like the flight pose, for the stability. So we get two of those. And then lastly, we get two of these big ones for his feet, which just peg into the bottoms of his feet. So that's fine. It is a little odd that the way they peg in, we end up with that gap and that tab in between. Seems like a poor design choice to me, but it is like that. So that's already a couple little weird things, and we've only gotten into the accessories. What I want to point out first on this guy is, for the most part, his paint job is really good. That red is fairly metallic, and it has a really nice finish to it. The gold does as well, and so does the silver, so that's pretty cool. He looks nice. Definitely looks good. One issue I found, though, is that some of the red parts seem to be missing a coat of paint or two. Like the forearms especially, they seem to be just a tiny bit lighter than the rest of the body. And we see that a little bit more back here on these pieces. It's not super noticeable, but once you get the figure under kind of bright light, you'll see it for sure. The eyes are painted blue, so they kind of look like they're lit up. It's okay, it's not bad. It's definitely good enough. The chest is painted kind of just white. Looks like it may be slightly metallic, but the chest repulsor, that is, that I'm talking about, just kind of looks white. The gold is not quite uniform, so I'm not sure if that's accurate or not. He wasn't on screen that much, but the gold for his leg is definitely duller than the gold around the chest. So again, I don't know if that's 100% accurate or not, but it is something worth noting. As far as accuracy goes, the sculpt is only okay. It does look like the suit, but some very important details are not quite there. Like the head, for instance. I don't know if you guys saw the movie, but if you did, his head had like fairly deep recesses for these grooves that go up here, that like kind of lead into the red, where you can see a little bit of a groove there. they were fairly deep, very pronounced, and it looked way cool. And then more stuff like that throughout the rest of the armor. It's just very stylized compared to the actual movie. So that's a little bit of a bummer. Obviously it looks cool, but it's not as accurate as I think it should be for being based on a live action movie. It should be pretty much what it looked like in the movie. Again, still looks cool, but not quite accurate. Alright, let's look at the articulation. For the head, we get a double ball peg that just pegs into the neck. It's it's a long ball peg. I didn't actually look inside the head before. It's a fairly long ball peg. It doesn't have the throw I would really care for. You can bring the head back like that, but you can't really make him look up any more than that. But when you do, you get that huge gap in the neck, so that's not ideal. He can look pretty far down, but then we also get that big gap in the neck. I'm not sure why they made it that way. That looks pretty weird. It does have good enough range of motion side to side, so you shouldn't have any trouble putting him in kind of like just a cool standing pose, but moving his head around is going to definitely lead to some gapping issues for sure. The neck feels like it's on a single ball peg. Yeah, that's what it looks like it is. So the neck can move around. I don't know if you can see that, but you can see right inside the torso. So the neck can move, but that's because it's just hollow pretty much. So that's kind of weird that they did that. Not the best design choice. You're gonna have to kind of tuck the neck in there and just not look down that gap, because you can see right inside there. Really odd. The shoulders have a kind of like a pull-out joint, a sliding joint. So that snaps out there and it gives it better range. You can see that kind of cup that just hides the joint, like on the Goku or other most Figuarts figures have something like that that hides that. So you can just slide that in and it makes it look a little more seamless, or pull that out and get a little bit better range of motion. However, now we can talk about the shoulder pad. Just like the Mark 43, it's connected to the shoulder, which I don't particularly care for because it's not a practical joint. Unfortunately, the way Figma did their shoulder pad worked out very nicely. I wish that's what the Figuarts figure did. This one lines up very nicely when it's just sitting in the plain neutral position. That looks good, other than the gap which you can hide from this. So that's fine. However, once you pose this, the shoulder pad can't sit in place properly. It kind of just pops up like that. You can't get it down, and it just doesn't work very well. It's not horrible. It's okay. It's just not good in any position other than the neutral position for the arm, and then you do end up with some odd posing options because that's all you can do. So if you want to like rotate his arm, the shoulder pad stays back there, which in some poses it'll be okay, but it's just not quite right. So I think having the floating shoulder pad is a much better option, but it's not bad. It'll do. It's not great at all. You do get our bicep swivel, so that's normal. Double jointed elbow, which has good range of motion and it's not too bad looking. It's okay. It does have some strange design choices, like the really wide flat elbow joint in there, but it's not too bad. It hides itself for the most part. The wrists have just a single ball peg, so very basic wrist articulation. For the torso, we have probably a double ball peg for the upper torso that allows it to lean forward and back. However, the forward and back is very limited, very, very limited. Side to side, it works pretty well, about as much as I would want it to work laterally, so that's okay. And then we do get our rotation, but it only goes about maybe 45 degrees of difference, so not very much at all. For the lower torso, we have this split in here, which looks like it would provide for a pretty nicely articulated, nicely designed joint, but it doesn't really do anything. I tried pulling on it and it doesn't seem to want to go anywhere. It doesn't tuck in on itself, it's just there. So the only joint really is this main one that lets him lean forward a little bit. Leans a little bit back and a little bit forward, and then this one just separates a little bit. So it's very odd the way they design that. That bottom joint doesn't lean at all, it doesn't rotate at all, it doesn't do anything. This is really the only useful articulation in the torso other than that lean right there. That's the only thing you get out of it. For the hips work pretty well, and they're better than the Mark 43 because they're not too wide. They're right where they belong normally, so that's good. And then you can drop them down like we could before to give us that better range of motion. You can bring the legs pretty far up. I've heard some people complain that you can see inside too much and you can see that ball peg in there. That doesn't bother me. You can only see that from behind, and if you really try to see it, so that's not a big deal at all. For me anyway. So that's a ball peg in here, so the leg's going to move around on that ball peg, and you can get it all the way out to the side, and you can bring it definitely forward enough to put them in like a crouching pose. You're going to have to fake it a little bit, but you can do it. And then this, like I said, is a ball peg for the thigh, so you can move the thigh around on that hip piece a little bit extra too. So that should help you pose him, no problem at all. And then when you put it back up, it looks pretty good. They did a nice job of hiding that joint. So the hips are much better than on the 43, but the torso way worse. Everything else is about the same so far. Well, I guess the neck isn't so good either. Now let's talk about the knees. I really hate the knees, and I'll explain why as we go over them. If you pull out the knees, they have good range of motion, but look at that joint. That is a giant piece of plastic for that knee joint, and it's just a giant skinny flat piece of plastic that doesn't look anything like any sort of anatomy at all. And then we have this big gap up here. And so here's what the problem is. The knee joint, you can even see it right there, pivots in the very back. So you have to have all this extra plastic up front to hide the gap when you pull the knee away from the front of the thigh. So if the pivot had been in the middle or forward, farther forward, this could have tucked inside, and you wouldn't have had to have all that extra plastic. The pivot would have been farther forward, it would have looked way more anatomically correct, and it wouldn't have had this big flat thing. And then the same thing for down here. The pivot's all the way in the back of the knee joint rather than being at the front, so you get all this extra plastic that's just really weird looking. It doesn't look that good. Once you get imposed, you can kind of hide it, but you can see it's just a really flat, strange looking knee. I don't know why they went that route. All they had to do was move that pivot farther forward and they would have been a-okay, but they didn't do it. So then the ankles, lastly, we have a hinge in there, and the foot can rotate around where it connects into the shin. That's where it rotates, and then the hinge goes like this. So you can see that. Pretty decent range of motion. You have this foot cover that has a little hinge on it, so you can either fold that up and bring the foot that way, or tuck it in and don't, whatever you want to do. It looks okay. It's not the best. It does limit it some if you want it to look good, but it is what it is. We do have a toe hinge in here, but with that foot plate, you don't get to use it all that much, so you're going to get just a tiny bit of range of motion out of that. And then lastly, we have the ankle rocker that does work nicely. It's built right into the hinge, so that's a nice true ankle rocker, so I do like that. So overall, the figure looks pretty good. It has some significant issues in terms of accuracy and in terms of design, but if you're just looking for a cool Iron Man figure, if you really like this suit, I can't say I don't recommend it. Just be aware of those issues, and I'll pose him up here at the end so you can see what he looks like in some poses that are probably indicative of what you're going to do for the display. But don't expect him to be that great. I thought he was going to be much better than he is, since they've made so many at this point, but he's just kind of average. If it wasn't for being my favorite suit, I'd probably be even a little harsher, so take that into consideration. So there it is, guys. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you can see my upcoming figure reviews, custom figures, and other good stuff. And in the meantime, keep collecting.